The water was wrong. That's the first thing I remember thinking, standing there on the deck of the Aurora Horizon with the wind cutting through my jacket like it had something personal against me. The year was 2147, and I'd spent the better part of my adult life on these research vessels, chasing ghosts across the Pacific. But this time felt different. My name is Dr. Alina Vasquez, marine biologist, oceanographer, and according to my mother, a woman who should have married a nice accountant instead of spending her life chasing fish stories. She used to say that with a laugh, but I could hear the worry underneath. The ocean doesn't care about your mother's concerns. The Aurora Horizon was state-of-the-art, one of those floating laboratories that looked more like a spaceship than a boat. Smooth white hull, solar panels stretching out like wings, and enough computing power to map the ocean floor in real time. Captain Marcus Webb ran a tight ship, former Navy, now head of the Pacific Deep Sea Research Initiative. He had the kind of voice that could calm a storm or start a mutiny, depending on his mood. "We're approaching the Mariana Trench coordinates," came his voice through the ship's intercom. "All stations, prepare for descent." I gripped the railing and looked out at the water, flat, too flat. The Pacific usually had some personality to it, even on calm days, but this stretch of ocean looked like glass, like someone had poured it out of a bottle and left it to set. The sky above was the color of old pewter, heavy with clouds that didn't seem to move. "Alina, you see that?" Dr. James Harrison appeared beside me, his tablet clutched to his chest like a lifeline. James was my colleague, my friend, and the most skeptical person I'd ever met. He didn't believe in anything he couldn't measure, which made him perfect for this kind of work, or terrible, depending on how you looked at it. "See what?" I asked. "The water, look at the surface tension, it's not right." I squinted. He was right. The water was too still, but also too something else. It had a quality to it that I couldn't name, like looking at liquid mercury. There were ripples, but they moved in patterns that didn't match the wind. "Subsurface current maybe," I said, but I didn't believe it. James shook his head. "No, I've been running sonar scans for the last hour. There's something down there, something big." "How big?" He looked at me with those pale eyes of his, the ones that always seemed to be calculating something. "I don't know yet, but it's moving." The ship groaned beneath us, that sound of metal stretching that always made my stomach drop. We were built for deep-sea exploration, but the Mariana Trench was no joke. The Challenger Deep, the lowest point on Earth's surface, sat at the bottom of that abyss. 11,000 meters of crushing pressure and absolute darkness. And according to the legends, something lived down there. Chapter 2: The Legend of the Kraken. The first legend we came to investigate was the Kraken. Everyone knows the story. Giant tentacles rising from the deep to drag ships to their doom. Norse sailors told tales of a creature so massive it could be mistaken for an island. The stories had been around for centuries, passed down from generation to generation, dismissed as the ravings of exhausted, superstitious men. But then came the sightings. They started about 50 years ago, scattered reports from deep-sea fishing vessels and military submarines. Strange shapes on sonar, tentacles the size of skyscrapers, ships that vanished without a trace in waters that should have been perfectly navigable. The scientific community laughed, of course. Giant squids had been confirmed, sure, but nothing on the scale of the Kraken. The largest giant squid ever recorded was about 40 feet long. Impressive, but not exactly ship-swallowing territory. Then came the footage. I remember when it leaked. Grainy, shaky video from a Japanese research submersible in the Philippine Trench. The camera captured something massive moving through the darkness, something with bioluminescent patches that pulsed like a heartbeat. It was too big to be a squid, too organized to be a whale pod. The video showed tentacles, at least 6 of them, each one longer than the submersible itself. They moved with a kind of terrifying intelligence, curling and uncurling in the dark water like they were searching for something. The Japanese government classified the footage, but the internet never forgets. Now, standing on the deck of the Aurora Horizon, I felt the weight of that legend pressing down on me. We were here to find proof, to either confirm or finally debunk the Kraken myth once and for all. "We're ready for deployment," Captain Webb announced. "Dr. Vasquez, Dr. Harrison, your submersible is prepped. I need final sign-off before we launch." James and I made our way to the launch bay, where the Nautilus II waited. It was a beautiful piece of engineering, all carbon fiber and reinforced glass, designed to withstand pressures that would turn steel into foil. The cockpit was cramped, barely big enough for 2 people, and a mountain of monitoring equipment. "You nervous?" James asked as we climbed in. "Terrified," I admitted. "You?" "Excited. This is what we've been working toward our whole careers." I strapped in and ran through the pre-dive checklist. Communications, life support, navigation, sonar, everything checked out. The hatch sealed with a hiss, and suddenly the world became very small. "Nautilus II, you are clear for descent," came the voice of the launch controller. The winch groaned and we were lifted from the ship, swinging out over the water. For a moment we hung there, suspended between sky and sea. Then the cables released and we dropped. The impact was gentler than I expected. The submersible settled into the water with barely a ripple, and suddenly we were surrounded by blue, the light filtering down from above in shifting patterns. "Descending to 200 meters, I announced. "All systems nominal." James was already hunched over the sonar display, his face lit by the green glow of the screen. "I'm picking up something. It's deep, really deep." "How deep?" "About 6,000 meters, and it's moving." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. The Kraken legend had always been about the deep, about things that lurked in places where sunlight never reached. If there was something down there, something that big, we were about to find it. "Take us down," James said, slowly. The descent took hours. We passed through layers of ocean that had their own ecosystems, their own strange inhabitants. Bioluminescent fish flickered past the viewport like underwater fireflies. Jellyfish with trailing tentacles drifted in the current. Once, something large and dark passed beneath us. A whale, probably, though it was too deep to be certain. At 3,000 meters, the light was gone completely. We were in total darkness now, relying entirely on our external floodlights. The beams cut through the water in pale cones, illuminating particles of sediment that drifted like snow. "I'm getting something on the sonar," James said, his voice tight. "Multiple contacts, large contacts." "How large?" He looked up at me, and in the dim light of the cockpit, his face looked pale. "The size of buildings, Alina, maybe larger." I felt my heart start to pound. "Show me." He swiveled the display so I could see. The screen showed a series of blips, each one massive, arranged in a pattern that made no sense. They weren't moving randomly. They were moving in formation, like they were following something. "Are those tentacles?" I asked. "I don't know what they are," James admitted, "but I've never seen anything like it." We descended deeper, the pressure gauge climbing steadily. At 5,000 meters, the water was starting to get cold. The submersible groaned around us, the carbon fiber compressing under the weight of the ocean. "I see something," I said, peering through the viewport. Ahead of us, barely visible in the beam of the floodlights, was a shape. It was massive, easily the size of a football field, and it was moving with a slow, deliberate grace. Tentacles trailed from its body, each one covered in bioluminescent patches that pulsed with a rhythm like a heartbeat. "Tell me you're seeing this," James whispered. "I'm seeing it." The creature turned, and for a moment it looked directly at us. I know that sounds impossible. It was dark, the creature was enormous, and we were barely a speck in comparison. But I felt it. Something in the water changed, a pressure that had nothing to do with depth. Then the creature moved, and suddenly we were caught in a current that shook the submersible like a toy. "Hold on," I shouted. The Nautilus II lurched, spinning wildly as the creature's tentacles swept past us. I caught a glimpse of suckers the size of dinner plates, each one lined with rows of teeth-like hooks. The water churned with sediment, and our floodlights flickered in the chaos. "I'm losing control," James yelled, gripping the controls. "The current is too strong. Get us out of here." The submersible bucked and rolled, alarms screaming from every console. Pressure warnings flashed red. Temperature warnings flashed blue. Somewhere in the chaos, I heard something crack, a hairline fracture in the viewport that would mean death if it went through. And then, as suddenly as it had started, it stopped. We were floating in darkness, the water still around us. The creature was gone, disappeared into the abyss like it had never been there at all. "What the hell was that?" James asked, his voice shaking. I looked at the sonar display. It was clear. No contacts, no massive shapes moving in formation, just empty water. "I don't know," I said, "but we're getting out of here." Chapter 3: The Silent Ships. We surfaced into a world that had changed. The aurora horizon was still there, bobbing on the waves like nothing had happened. But the sky was different, dark, heavy with clouds that swirled in patterns I'd never seen before. The air smelled wrong, metallic and sharp, like lightning had just struck nearby. "What happened up here?" I asked as we climbed out of the submersible. Captain Webb met us on the launch bay, his face grim. "We lost contact with you for about 3 hours. All our instruments went crazy. The compass, the GPS, even the radios. It was like the whole world went silent." 3 hours. James looked at his watch. "We were down there for maybe 45 minutes. Webb shook his head. "Time dilation. The deep does strange things to time. We've seen it before." I didn't like the way he said that. "What do you mean, you've seen it before?" The captain looked at me, and for a moment I saw something in his eyes that I'd never seen before. Fear. "The Japanese team that went missing in the Philippine Trench," he said. "They were gone for 3 days. When they surfaced, they thought they'd been underwater for 6 hours. They were all half-mad, babbling about lights and sounds and other things." "What other things?" "Ghost. They said they saw ghost ships." I felt a coldness that had nothing to do with the wind. The second legend we'd come to investigate. The Flying Dutchman, the ghost fleet of the Pacific, the spectral vessels that sailors claimed to see on dark nights. Ships that sailed without crews, full of the dead. At first I dismissed it. Ghost ships were stories, legends told to frighten sailors. The science was clear. There was no evidence of any such phenomenon. But after what we'd seen in the deep, I wasn't so sure. "Show me the footage," I said, "from the Japanese submersible." Captain Webb led us to the bridge, where screens displayed a patchwork of data. He pulled up the footage, grainy and flickering, showing the dark water of the Philippine Trench. And there it was. A ship, but not like any ship I'd ever seen. It was massive, easily 400 meters long, with a hull that seemed to shimmer and shift in the water. Lights flickered along its length, but they weren't normal lights. They were cold, pale, like the bioluminescence of deep-sea creatures. "That's not a ship," James said. "That's something else." We watched as the shape moved through the water, impossibly fast for something so large. It seemed to flicker in and out of existence, like it was there and not there at the same time. "That's what we saw," Webb said, "just before you surfaced." I looked at the captain. "You saw something like this up here?" He nodded. "It appeared on radar about an hour ago. Massive contact, moving at impossible speed. We tried to intercept, but it vanished before we could get a visual." "What do you think it is?" Webb's jaw tightened. "I think it's the same thing you saw down there. The same thing the Japanese team saw. It's like theirs. Gates, doorways between the deep and the surface." "That's not scientifically possible," James objected. "Isn't it?" Webb asked. You saw what you saw, we saw what we saw. The legends didn't come from nowhere. Sailors have been seeing these things for centuries. We just finally have the technology to record it. The ship groaned again and I felt the vibration through my boots. Something was happening. Something was changing. "Captain," called a crew member from the navigation station. "I'm picking up multiple contacts on radar. They're appearing out of nowhere." Webb moved to the display, his eyes widening. "How many?" "Dozens? No, hundreds. They're everywhere." I looked at the screen and my blood ran cold. The contacts were clustered in a pattern, arranged in circles and lines that looked almost like writing. They were moving, but not in any direction I could understand. They were just shifting. "Bring us about," Webb ordered. "Full power to engines, get us out of here." But even as he spoke, the lights flickered. The ship systems were failing one by one, first the radar, then the navigation, then the communications. "Captain, I'm losing everything," the crew member shouted. "It's like something's draining our power." The lights went out. We were plunged into darkness, the only illumination coming from emergency strips along the floor. The ship was silent, the engines dead. Then we heard it. A sound, low and throbbing like a heartbeat made of sound waves. It resonated through the hull, through our bodies, through our bones. "What is that?" someone whispered. "It's coming from below," I said. "It's coming from the deep." Chapter 4. The Ghost Fleet ARRIVS. The sound grew louder, more insistent. It wasn't just a noise, it was a vibration, a frequency that seemed to bypass our ears and speak directly to our nervous systems. I felt it in my teeth, in my chest, in the roots of my hair. Then we saw the lights. Through the bridge windows, the darkness began to flicker with pale, ghostly luminescence. Shapes were forming on the water, shapes that shouldn't exist. Ships, but not ships. Some were ancient, with wooden hulls and torn sails. Others were modern, sleek and metallic, covered in rust and barnacles. And all of them were moving without engines, without crews. "The Flying Dutchman," James breathed. "It's real, they're all real." The ships glided toward us, silent as death. I could see details now, the gaping holes in their hulls, the tattered rigging, the spectral figures that stood on their decks like statues. They were translucent, partially there, like images projected on smoke. "Everyone stay calm," Captain Webb ordered. "We don't know what we're dealing with." But even as he spoke, one of the ghost ships drew alongside the Aurora horizon. It was a galleon, Spanish by the look of it, with barnacles crusting its hull like tumors. The crew were barely visible gray shapes that seemed to be made of fog and memory. And in the middle of it all, there was a woman. She stood at the bow of the galleon, wrapped in a dress that might have been white once. Her hair streamed in the wind, even though there was no wind. Her face was pale, her eyes dark, and she was looking directly at me. "She sees us," I whispered. "Who?" James asked. "The woman, she's looking at us." I stepped closer to the window, unable to help myself. There was something compelling about her, something that drew me in even as every instinct screamed at me to run. And then she spoke. Her voice came through the hull, through the walls, through the bones of the ship and into my mind. It wasn't words exactly, more like emotions, images, feelings that bypassed language and went straight to the soul. "Help us." I stumbled back, my heart racing. She said something, she asked for help. "What did she say?" Captain Webb demanded. Help them all." The ghostly woman raised her hand, pointing toward the water. I looked down, past the railings of the Aurora horizon, and saw what she was pointing at. The water was glowing. Beneath the surface, far below, something was rising, something vast, ancient, and awake. The bioluminescent patches that we'd seen on the Kraken were pulsing in rhythm with the ghostly lights of the fleet. "They're connected," I said. "The Kraken, the ghost ships, all of it, it's all connected." "What do you mean?" James asked. "Think about it. The legends, all of them. The Kraken, the Flying Dutchman, the mermaids, the sea monsters. They're all real, but they're also all protective. They're guardians. Guardians of what? I looked at the woman on the ghost ship. She was still pointing at the water, and I understood. The deep, I said. They're guardians of the deep. There's something down there, something that's been sleeping for eons, and we woke it up. The ship shuddered violently. The ghostly fleet began to close in around us, their silent forms pressing against the hull of the Aurora horizon like a spectral net. "Captain, we need to leave," I shouted, "now." But the captain was staring at something on the bridge display, his face gray. "We can't. The engines are dead. We're stuck." The woman on the ghost ship raised her other hand, and suddenly the Aurora horizon began to move. Not under its own power, being pulled, dragged by invisible forces toward the center of the ghost fleet. "We're being boarded," someone screamed. I looked up and saw them, spectral figures streaming onto our ship, passing through walls and doors like they were made of water. They were everywhere, gray and insubstantial, but they were real. I could feel them. And they were terrified. Chapter 5, The Kraken Speaks. The ghostly figures surrounded us, and I finally understood what they were trying to do. They weren't attacking, they were hurting us, pushing us toward the center of the fleet. "They want us to go below," I said, "into the deep." "Why would they want that?" James asked, his voice shaking. "Because that's where the truth is. That's where everything started." I pushed through the spectral crowd, making my way to the launch bay. The Nautilus II was still there, tethered to the ship by a single cable. I climbed in, motioning for James to follow. "What are you doing?" he demanded. "I'm going down. I'm going to find out what's really going on." "You'll die." "Maybe, but I have to try." Captain Webb appeared at the launch bay, his face drawn. "Dr. Vasquez, I can't allow this. It's too dangerous." I looked at him, and for a moment I saw the man behind the captain's uniform, the man who had spent decades chasing legends, who had seen things that couldn't be explained. He knew the risks. He knew what we were dealing with. "Captain," I said softly, "if I don't go, we're all going to die. The ship, the crew, everyone. The ghosts are scared, and if they're scared, then whatever's down there is something to be afraid of." He hesitated, then nodded. "Godspeed, Dr. Vasquez." The winch lowered us into the water for the second time that day. The ghost fleet pressed in around us, their spectral forms flickering in the floodlights. And below us, the abyss was waiting. We descended faster this time, not bothering with the slow, methodical approach we'd used before. The submersible shook and groaned as we plunged into the darkness, past 3,000 meters, past 5, past the point where we'd seen the Kraken before. "I'm picking up something on the sonar," James said. "Multiple contacts, moving in formation." "Show me." The display flickered and I saw them, hundreds of shapes, all moving in the same direction. They were massive, each one as big as the Kraken we'd seen before. "Are those Krakens?" James finished. "Dozens of them, maybe hundreds." The creatures were swimming in a circle, moving around something in the center of the formation. I couldn't see what it was. The sonar couldn't penetrate that deep, but I could feel it. A presence, vast and ancient, sleeping in the dark. We descended further, until the pressure warning started flashing red. The submersible couldn't take much more of this. We were at 10,000 meters, approaching the limits of human engineering. And then I saw it. The Kraken were all swimming around a central point, a pillar of rock that rose from the deepest part of the trench. The pillar was covered in carvings, symbols that looked almost like writing, and at the base of the pillar there was a door. A real door made of metal, with hinges and handles and everything. "That's impossible," James breathed. "There's no way that's down here." But it was. The door was massive, easily 50 feet tall, and it was covered in the same bioluminescent patches we'd seen on the Kraken. It pulsed with a slow, rhythmic light, like a heartbeat. The door was open. Not just open, it was broken, shattered from the inside. The metal was twisted and torn as if something had pushed its way through from the other side. And inside the door, in the darkness beyond, something was moving. The legends, I said, they weren't about monsters, they were about this, about keeping this door closed. What's through the door? James asked. I don't know, but I think the Kraken and the ghost ships are trying to close it. They've been doing it for centuries, keeping whatever's inside from getting out. We watched as the Kraken swarmed around the door, their tentacles wrapping around the broken metal, trying to pull it closed. The ghost ships circled above us, their spectral crews watching from the decks. But it was no use. The door was too damaged, too broken. Something had already escaped. Elena, look. I followed James's gaze and saw it. A shape, barely visible in the darkness, swimming out of the door. It was smaller than the Kraken, maybe the size of a submarine, but it was moving with terrible purpose. And it was heading straight for us. Get us out of here, I screamed. James slammed the controls and the submersible shot upward. The creature followed, closing the distance between us with terrifying speed. I caught a glimpse of it through the viewport, a thing of tentacles and teeth and eyes, hundreds of eyes, all staring at me with terrible hunger. We're not going to make it, James shouted. Faster, go faster. The submersible bucked and shook, the engines screaming as we pushed them to their limits. The creature was right behind us, its tentacles reaching out, almost touching the hull. And then, just as it was about to catch us, something else intervened. The Kraken, all of them, dozens of massive creatures, surging between us and the thing from the door. They attacked it with a fury I'd never seen before, their tentacles wrapping around it, dragging it back toward the abyss. Go, James yelled. Get us to the surface. We shot upward, the submersible groaning and shaking. The ghost ships parted to let us through, their spectral crews watching with expressions that might have been relief. We burst through the surface into a world that was suddenly, impossibly calm. The aurora horizon was there, its lights blazing. The ghost fleet was gone, vanished like a dream. And the water was still. Chapter 6, The Truth Revealed. We climbed out of the submersible into the arms of the crew, who had all gathered on the launch bay to welcome us. Captain Webb was there, his face tired but relieved. What happened down there? He asked. I shook my head. I'm not sure I can explain it. We gathered in the ship's conference room, the crew and scientists huddled together as I told them what we'd seen. The door, the carvings, the thing that had escaped. The Kraken fighting to keep it contained. It's like a prison, I said. The deep ocean is a prison for something ancient, something that's been down there since before humans existed. Impossible, James said, but his voice lacked conviction. There's no way something like that could exist. I don't know what it is, I admitted. But I know it's real, we all saw it. The Kraken, the ghost ships, all of it. They're guardians protecting us from whatever's locked down there. But the door is broken, a crew member said. We saw it, the thing got out. Yes, I said, something got out and it's still out there. We spent the next few hours debriefing, trying to make sense of what we'd seen. The data we'd collected was a mess, sonar readings that made no sense, video footage that flickered and distorted, audio recordings that sounded like screams. But there was one thing we couldn't deny. The legends were real, all of them. The Kraken, the Flying Dutchman, the sea monsters of old. They weren't myths or fantasies. They were warnings passed down through generations, trying to tell us something we'd forgotten. That the deep ocean wasn't empty. That there were things down there, things we didn't understand. And that some doors, once opened, could never be closed again. Captain Webb, I said, we need to go back. We need to seal that door. He shook his head. We can't. The aurora horizon isn't equipped for that kind of operation. We'd need a full military expedition, years of planning, resources we don't have. Then what do we do? The captain looked at me, his eyes weary. We tell people, we tell everyone. The world needs to know what's down there. Part 2, The Echoes of the Deep. Chapter 7, The Aftermath. 3 weeks after our return, I found myself sitting in a government office in Washington, D.C., trying to convince a panel of generals and scientists that everything we knew about the ocean was wrong. It wasn't going well. Dr. Vasquez, General Morrison said, his voice dripping with skepticism. You expect us to believe that there's an ancient prison at the bottom of the Mariana Trench, guarded by giant squid and ghost ships. We have footage, I said. We have sonar data, we have audio recordings. All of which could be faked. I wanted to scream, why would I fake this? What would I gain? Attention, funding, your 15 minutes of fame. I stood up, unable to contain my frustration. General, I've spent my entire career studying the ocean. I've dedicated my life to understanding it. I don't have time for games. There's something down there and it's dangerous. Morrison leaned back in his chair. Even if what you're saying is true, and I'm not saying it is, there's nothing we can do about it. The Mariana Trench is 11,000 meters deep. We don't have the technology to seal a door at that depth. We could try. We could at least study it, understand what we're dealing with. With what resources? Our military budget is already stretched thin. The Navy has more important things to worry about than fairy tales. I left the office feeling defeated. The world didn't want to hear the truth. They wanted to believe that everything was fine, that the ocean was just water, that there was nothing to fear. But I knew better. James met me in the hallway, his face pale. They didn't believe you, did they? Of course not. They think I'm crazy. Maybe we are, he said. Maybe what we saw wasn't real. I looked at him, and for a moment I saw the doubt in his eyes. He wanted to believe that it had all been a hallucination, a trick of the deep. It would be easier that way. It was real, James. You know it was. I know, he sighed. So what do we do now? We go back, we find the door again, we close it ourselves. You can't be serious. The military wouldn't approve a mission like that. We don't have the funding, the equipment, anything. We'll find a way, we have to. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the door in my dreams, the broken metal, the darkness beyond. I kept hearing the voice of the ghost woman, the plea for help. Help us all. I got out of bed and went to my computer, pulling up the data we'd collected from the submersible. The sonar readings, the audio recordings, the video footage. I combed through it all, looking for something, anything that might help. And I found it. Buried in the audio, beneath layers of static and distortion, there was a pattern, a rhythm, pulsing like a heartbeat. It was the same rhythm we'd felt through the hull of the Aurora horizon, the same frequency that had resonated through our bodies. But now I could see it for what it really was. A message. Chapter 8, The Code of the Abyss. The rhythm wasn't random. It was a sequence, a pattern that repeated every few seconds. I ran it through a frequency analyzer, trying to decode it. It took me 3 days. When I finally cracked it, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The message was ancient, older than human civilization, written in a language that had no equivalent in any known culture. But I could understand it. The door is open, the prison is broken, the ancient one awakens. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. The message was a warning, a plea for help. The deep was trying to communicate with us, trying to tell us what we needed to do. And I finally understood. The Krakens, the ghost ships, all of it, they weren't just guardians. They were messengers, carrying a warning from the deep to the surface. They were trying to tell us that the Ancient One, the thing in the darkness, had escaped. And it was coming. I called James immediately. I figured it out. The message, the sounds, all of it, it's a warning. What are you talking about? The door at the bottom of the trench. It wasn't just a prison, it was a seal, and we broke it. How? Us, I said bitterly. Humanity. All the deep-sea exploration, the submarine traffic, the sonar pings. We weakened the seal, we woke it up. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then James spoke, his voice barely a whisper. So what do? We have to go back. We have to reseal the door. How? We don't have the resources. No one believes us. Then we do it alone. I spent the next few weeks making preparations. I sold everything I owned, cashed in my retirement savings, called in every favor I'd ever earned. James did the same. Together, we managed to fund a small expedition, just enough for one submersible and a skeleton crew. We hired Captain Webb and the Aurora Horizon. He didn't ask questions. I think part of him had known all along. Chapter 9, The Second Descent. The journey back to the Mariana Trench felt different this time. The weight of what we were about to do pressed down on me like the water pressure would soon press down on the submersible. You ready for this? James asked as we climbed into the Nautilus II. Ready as I'll ever be. We descended faster this time, not bothering with the careful, methodical approach. The submersible groaned and shook, the pressure warnings flashing red, but we kept going. At 6,000 meters, we saw them. The Krakens, dozens of them, swimming in formation around the pillar. They were bigger than I remembered, their bioluminescent patches brighter, their movements more agitated. They know we're coming, I said. How can you tell? They're expecting us. The Krakens parted, opening a path toward the pillar. The door was still there, still broken, still open, but something had changed. The thing from the deep, the creature that had chased us before, was gone. The door, I said, pointing. It's different, look at the symbols. James studied the carvings on the pillar. They're glowing. I don't remember them glowing before. They're powering up. It's like a system, a security system. The door was the seal and the symbols are the failsafe. We descended closer, the submersible barely holding together under the pressure. I could feel the vibrations through the hull, the same rhythm we'd heard before, but stronger now. It was pulling me, drawing me toward the door. Elena, what are you doing? I have to go inside. That's insane. Maybe, but it's the only way. I maneuvered the submersible through the broken door into the darkness beyond. The tunnel stretched on for what felt like miles, carved into the rock of the trench. The walls were covered in symbols, all glowing with that same pale light. And at the end of the tunnel, there was a chamber. It was vast, easily the size of a stadium, and it was filled with water. The submersible's floodlights barely penetrated the gloom, but I could see shapes moving in the darkness, shapes that were too big to be Kraken. What is this place? James whispered. It's the prison, I said. The real prison. The Kraken are just the guards. The shapes in the darkness moved closer. I could see them now, creatures of tentacles and teeth, of eyes and mouths, of things that shouldn't exist. They were nightmares made flesh, ancient beings from a time before humanity. And in the center of the chamber, there was a throne. It was carved from the same rock as the tunnel, covered in symbols and glowing with that pale light. And on the throne, there sat a figure. It was humanoid vaguely, but not human. Its skin was a sickly gray, its eyes were black, and its mouth was full of teeth that were too sharp, too many. Welcome, it said. The voice echoed in my mind, bypassing my ears entirely. I have been waiting for you. What are you? I managed to ask. I am the one they feared, the one they locked away, the one who will finally bring an end to your kind. You're the ancient one, the thing from the deep. Yes, and now that I am free, nothing will stop me. Chapter 10, The Sacrifice. The creature rose from its throne, its form seeming to shift and distort in the water. The other shapes in the chamber moved closer, surrounding us. "You have no idea what you've done," it said. "You've broken the seal, woken me from my sleep. Now I will destroy everything you love, everything you've built, everything you've ever known." "No," I said, "you won't." The creature laughed, a horrible sound that resonated through the water. "You think you can stop me, with your tiny submersible and your pathetic weapons?" "I don't have to stop you," I said. "I just have to contain you." I reached for the control panel, my fingers hovering over the self-destruct sequence. James grabbed my arm. "Elena, what are you doing?" "Closing the door, permanently." "You'll kill us." "Maybe, but I'll stop it." I pressed the button. The submersible's reactor went critical, the energy building. The creature screamed as the chamber began to collapse, the symbols on the walls flaring bright white, the seal reforming. The last thing I saw was the creature being dragged back into its throne, the walls closing in around it, sealing it away for eternity. Then everything went white. Part 3, The Shattered Glass. Chapter 11, HFY Frontier. I woke up on the deck of the Aurora Horizon, coughing up seawater, with James's face hovering above me. "Don't ever do that again," he said. "Did it work?" He smiled, a weak, exhausted smile. "It worked. The door is sealed, the creatures are contained." I sat up, my entire body aching. The sky was clear, the water calm. The ghost fleet was gone, the Krakens gone, everything gone. "It's over," I whispered. "For now," James said, "but the seal is still weak. It'll need to be reinforced, maintained. We'll need to watch it, make sure it never breaks again." "Then that's what we'll do." We spent the next few weeks recovering, monitoring the site, making sure the seal held. Captain Webb stayed with us, his crew working tirelessly to keep the Aurora Horizon operational. And slowly, the truth began to spread. Scientists from around the world came to see what we'd found. Governments began to take notice, offering resources, funding, support. The story of the deep, of the ancient prison, of the Krakens and ghost ships and sea monsters became the story of the century. And I became the face of it all. Chapter 12, The Legacy of the Deep. The years passed, and we built a permanent research station at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. It wasn't easy. The engineering challenges were immense, the cost astronomical, but we did it. We named it the Vasquez Deep Sea Observatory. I spent most of my time there, monitoring the seal, studying the symbols, trying to understand the message of the deep. James was with me, his skepticism replaced by a fierce dedication to our work. We learned a lot. The ancient beings, the ones we'd sealed away, weren't just monsters. They were a civilization, older than humanity, older than the dinosaurs, older than life itself. They'd built the prison, sealed themselves away to protect the surface world. But they'd been sleeping for so long, they'd forgotten what they were protecting. "The seal is holding," I reported to the surface one day. "No signs of weakness." "Good," Captain Webb replied. He'd retired from active duty but still served as our liaison to the military. "We'll keep monitoring from up here." I turned to James. "We did it, we actually did it." "Don't get comfortable," he said. "The seal is stable now, but it's still a fragile thing. The creatures are patient. They'll try again. Then we'll be ready." Chapter 13, The Final Lesson. 30 years later, I sat in my office at the observatory, looking out at the water through the reinforced glass. The research had expanded, the station grown. We'd learned so much, but there was still so much we didn't understand. And then the message came. It was faint at first, barely visible on the sonar display, but it was there. A series of blips, moving toward the seal. "They're trying again," I said. "James, get the crew ready." But James was already there, his face grim. "I've seen it. They're mobilizing." We gathered the team, prepared the submersibles, readied the defense systems. It had been decades since the last incident, but we were ready. And then the attack came. The creatures surged against the seal, their tentacles wrapping around the metal, their eyes blazing with ancient fury. The Krakens fought back, their spectral crews joining the battle. But this time, we had something we didn't have before. Technology, knowledge, understanding. We'd studied the symbols, learned to read the language of the deep. We'd built devices that could reinforce the seal, weapons that could repel the creatures. We were ready. The battle raged for hours, the water churning with the violence of it all. But in the end, we held the line. The seal held. The creatures retreated. It was over. But as I watched the last of them disappear into the darkness, I realized something. The deep wasn't empty. It was filled with wonders and terrors, with secrets and truths. And the message, the one that had been sent to us through the ages, was still there. The door is open. The Ancient One awakens. No, I thought. The Ancient One has been awake all along. It's the surface that has been sleeping. And now that we're awake, we have a responsibility. To protect the deep, to guard the seal, to remember the truth that the legends tried to tell us. The Kraken, the ghost ships, the sea monsters, they weren't myths. They were warnings. They were guides. They were the guardians of a world we'd forgotten. And they were waiting for us. Epilogue: The Calling. I'm old now, my hair gray, my joints aching. The observatory has been passed on to a new generation, scientists who are smarter and more dedicated than I ever was. But I still visit. Every year on the anniversary of our first descent, I come back to the Mariana Trench. I stand on the deck of the Aurora horizon, the wind in my face, the water stretching out before me, and I listen. Sometimes I can still hear it, the rhythm, the heartbeat, the voice of the deep. The door is closed, the seal is strong, the Ancient One sleeps. It's a comfort, a promise, a reminder that we're not alone, that there's more to this world than we can see, more to this ocean than we can comprehend. And that somewhere in the depths of the abyss, the Krakens are still swimming, the ghost ships are still sailing, the guardians are still watching, waiting for the day when we'll need them again.